So hello and welcome, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm Julie, the florist that teaches. I am based down in Faversham in Kent, in the southeast of England, and after the successful run of the 10 Christmas Zoom classes in the run-up to Christmas, I thought it would be quite nice to have some spring classes as well. So the beauty of these classes is that you can sign up via my website and go for all 10 classes at once, or you can pick and choose which classes you'd like to attend. So it's lovely to have you joining here live, but of course, for those of you who are receiving the recording afterwards, hello and welcome too. So the beauty of the class is, because we're using Zoom, I can record, and I'm just checking the little icon at the top that we are definitely recording, and you can pick up the video and watch it and re-watch it when it's convenient for you to do. So because this is the first class of the series, just a little bit of housekeeping duties. Rather rudely, I've got you all on mute and I've spotlighted my video. As you know, if you're used to using Zoom before, as you talk, normally the video flashes to your face. And because I'm going to be sending this recording out to other people, I want the recording to be on me rather on your lovely faces. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask during the course of the class, the sort of formal teaching bit probably take not more than half an hour, you can ask it in the chat box. But as soon as I sign off formally, I will then take you all off mute, and then we can have a proper chat and make it as near, close as possible to a real life class experience. So those of you who are new to the group, some people know each other quite well already because we've been meeting in class for 10 weeks and actually for longer than that, since the beginning of lockdown, March last year. We can have a proper chat, and of course I love seeing what you get up to and being inspired by what you are doing as well. So I'm conscious of the fact that I've asked you to bring to class or hyacinths and wax from candles. So it's a bit of a project. I'm starting us off with something that needs a bit of, the mechanics are sort of straightforward but difficult at the same time, so don't be put off. So I do realise that you may feel that you don't want to make and create along with me after the formal teaching bit of class, but hopefully you'll go away with the sufficient knowledge that you can make and create in your own time. So don't be put off. I've told you to get these ingredients and you're thinking, goodness me, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this whilst watching this presentation on my mobile phone or my tablet. It's all about me just inspiring you to get creative and creating a little bit of community, so you don't feel you're lost and out there on your own in the big old world, that you have got like-minded women who are joining together at the same time just to have a chat and be creative. And those, we know that working with flowers and being creative is really good for our mental health, and that's really important, especially during the global pandemic when we are all very much isolated for our own personal health, but it's just sometimes difficult on our well-being as well. So I don't know whether you have received, I'm hoping you've all received a copy of today's handout. So those of you who paid in full, you would have had the full 10-week brochure given to you. And those of you who are picking and choosing, I will be sending out the weekly handout, and we'll send out a weekly handout to everybody just in case you get in a muddle. So I know you can't read that, but it just gives you a bit of a description of what we're doing. And there's some links in there, some hyperlinks. So in the event that there's something you need to source that you haven't already got at home, if you click through, it'll take you to Amazon and it'll give you a picture of the kind of thing I'm talking about. Now, full disclosure here, I'm an Amazon affiliate, and if you decide to shop using these links, I may get a very small commission, but it doesn't affect the price you pay. But at least if you've seen a picture of what it is I'm suggesting you use, you've got more of an idea when you do sort of shop your home or decide to add something to your shopping list when you go out and do your essential shop. There's also some photographs as well for inspiration only, because I know sometimes when you write stuff down, it's difficult for me to put across what we're doing without giving the game away, before you've come to class. Hopefully the pictures will give you an inspiration of what you're going to do. And of course, you don't need to do exactly what I'm doing. You might decide to develop the ideas and get a little bit more creative. Now, at this point in the class, before we talk about what we're going to do, I am going to talk just briefly about what we're going to do next week on page 2, for those of you who are coming along to class next week. Next week, we're doing something on a flat frame. Now, I have got a canvas frame, a little box frame. it may be that you want to make your project on a piece of cardboard. So all those packaging boxes we've been having from all our online shopping, you might find something sturdy like that. And I did also think IKEA frames. Have you ever bought those IKEA box frames that come with a piece of glass at the front, and you can either have the glass set at the front or set back a little bit? That would be a good opportunity. And we're going to be using wool and doing some binding and wrapping techniques and adding a little bit of a floral flourish. So I always say my classes are suitable for everybody. No previous experience required, but because we can't go out and buy flowers like we used to this time last year, and I can only carry on saying that for a little bit more, it's sort of morphing into craft classes using some of our floristry and flower arranging techniques. So the other thing, I like to add a floral flourish. And how am I going to add flowers to a blank canvas next week? I'm going to be using some test tubes. And I realise that you may not have these in your flower arranging kit. Hence, I have put a link, I believe, to some glass test tubes, Amazon, that if you are a flower arranger, it may be that you've got a stash of these, which are the plastic test tubes that you get orchids in or anthuriums in. So it might be worth looking out for those next week. And you want to know what we're doing today. And what we are going to be doing is dipping hyacinth bulbs in wax. So I've got a pan of water on the side where I have been melting my wax, and I will bring that onto the camera and show you what we're going to do. But this is what I have made at the weekend to show you. So I have managed my bulb, my hyacinth bulb, has no roots, it has no soil, and it's got a very flat bottom. So I can just stand it. Work out where to put that. It will stand steady on my table. So I could have that lined up across my mantelpiece. If I'm thinking onwards to Easter, will or will we be able to meet our families at Easter? Who knows? But it could be something nice as a table setting. And just to use it a little bit more creatively, and what I'm going to do with my hyacinth is that I'm going to actually put it into a fruit bowl-ish arrangement, and I'll show you that right at the end. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a little bit of a shuffle around to bring in my camera on the side, get rid of the bits that we need for next week. I'm going to swap over cameras. So things may go blank for a moment, don't worry about it. So off on the side, I am just going to dash to my kitchen stove and bring across my pan of boiling water. So there's a bit of health and safety warning here, ladies. It seems like that, we think about working with flowers and how beautiful it's going to be, and isn't it great? But of course we have to remember not to, sharp scissors and all the rest of it. I've got a pan of boiling water and I've got a pan of molten wax. And what this can of molten wax started off like was the odds and ends of my Christmas candles. So you can see here, I've got a pillar candle here, looking pretty rubbishy. I've got some old tea lights and some stubby bits of taper candle. And what I do, probably most normal people in the world would throw these away, and I don't. I put them in my little collecting pot, and this nightlight that's never lit properly, I push it out of the little metal wrapper. And I put that little metal wrapper, I think they recycle, so that goes in recycling. And I would snap the candle in half because I want to get rid of that little metal bit there that's just pinged away. And then I've put everything in there in a bain-marie, so to speak. So it's all my candle odds and ends I've been saving up, and I have had them in this pan. Now I will say that I don't know whether you can pick up on the edge here. There are splatterings of wax. So it's something to do. Do not use your best pan. I would suggest you have a cloth with you because things are hot. But you can imagine what I've done. I've put my water into the pan there, and I've brought it to the boil, and then I've had it simmered. And it probably took about 20 minutes. And if I slop that round, hopefully you'll be able to see with the light that there is molten wax in there. It is going to be hot. And that is what we're going to be using today. And the container I've got it in is a coffee pot from the charity shop. So I don't mind whether that gets messed up. I'm slightly more concerned about my milk pan, and in due course, I will, when the charity shops are open again, I shall be getting myself a crafting pan. And you can see here just the sort of, it's not scum from the water, that's actually waxy droplets, but with a cloth to hand, you can wipe it all off. And you could use a kitchen towel for that, wipe it all off, put the kitchen towel in the bin, and then you'll be ready to wash your pan up in the normal way. You don't want to be pouring molten wax down your sink because you're going to end up with a blockage. So I'm going to rest that there and put my pan to the side. We're then bringing in our hyacinths. So I've got some potted hyacinths, which I bought before Christmas. I was rather hoping they were going to be white, but they're pink. I have also got hyacinths that I started forcing, and I haven't had them out of the underbed area long enough for them to really start to green up. So that's another option. I don't really want to pull those up though, because I want them to be flowering nicely. And then normally when I have my hyacinths, I then plant them in the garden to enjoy next year. So I have actually been around the garden digging up some of my hyacinths that I've got. And just to show you, you have options. So whether it's something you've got in your garden already, or something you've been forcing, or something you've picked up either from, you pre-ordered from your florist, or when you're doing your essential shop at the weekend, that you can actually buy potted hyacinths. And there's nothing nicer than releasing something that the supermarket has made in order that you can breathe new life into it. So what I should do there, I'm just going to move that slightly out of the way. And you'll see that I've got no roots and a nice flat bottom to my hyacinth. So how did I get that to happen? Well, I had to be cruel to be kind. So here is my potted hyacinth from the florist. I am going to rip, sort of screw top off the hyacinth, which seems, as we all love flowers, slightly counterintuitive. So deep breath, everybody. And I'm going to rotate that round. And with a little care, the roots are left behind and I get the bulbous bulb left. So I can clean that off. Now it's come off quite cleanly there, quite flat. But if you found that you still had your roots attached, that you could then, I've got a vegetable knife here, go across and smooth it down. So let's have a go with two of these. I've bought both. Let's have a go with both. It's a bit of a mucky job. So you can see here, pot bound, twisting it off. And I've made sure that my hyacinths were well and truly watered so that they are, the best start in life. The energy is in the bulbs, but obviously they're not going to be able to take any more water up because I am putting a sealed barrier around the roots. So if you ended up, when you sort of screwed off your hyacinth top, you want to get rid of these roots, and I'm going to take my knife and slice my way through it. And that's what gives me the flat bottom that enables my hyacinths to stand up like so. So job done for number one. I'm going to just clean them off a bit. So if you were doing this at home, you may be running these under the tap just to take off the excess dirt. I've got an old muslin cloth here. And of course, you'd be able to tidy away as you go. So excuse my mess. Now you need to be very careful. Next point, because I'm going to tell you to dip your hyacinth bulbs into your wax. So really, really be careful. Make sure your container's on a sturdy surface. You've got protection on your surface as well. You don't want any accidents. I will say that, of course, if you burn yourself, run it under the tap. And of course, if you spill any wax anywhere on your surfaces, you can always get a knife, a palette knife, and you can, rub it off like that, as if you had pastry stuck on your worktop. I don't know whether you do that when you have a pastry on your palette knife. So I will lift the lid off, and it's clear wax, and you'll see that when the wax is cooled, it cools and goes white. So I've just got white candles here. So I'm very gently going to take my hyacinth bulb and dip it into the wax. Oh, the poor flower. That must be very painful. And you can see here, it looks quite clear. And you can probably see I've gone a little bit too deep there. There's a little wax coming up. And all I tend to do is dip it and lift it, and dip it and lift it until I get the sort of depth of colour in terms of the whiteness that I really like. So this is quite a fun job to do, but you can see here that I've picked the hyacinths to demonstrate with. It's got quite a long head, so I'm not getting my fingers anywhere near that hot wax. And you could keep dipping, dipping, dipping. So while I let that dry and set it down there, you know, if you've got a wax bath going, how about, you know, really making use of it? And I've got here some beautiful buried ivy heads, and that might be something quite nice. You might like to have fun with that, and just changing the look and appearance. So again, as I lift it out, it just looks like it's got a sort of slightly glaucous look to it. I do think you need to go for more than one dip. And again, I've picked my ivy heads. They've got quite long stems to them, so my fingers aren't getting anywhere near that wax. And you would go through dipping, you know, letting it quick in and out and letting it dry. So in all good ways, I have done one ahead of time, and you can see there that that is the ivy head. I have dipped, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, so you can see what the difference is. And it just gives a nice texture. It will last quite a long time, and you can think about using those to, you know, to decorate your flower arrangements or any pots that you may have. And you can see that as soon as it dries, because I've set it straight, it is standing up straight as well. Now the issue is, next question is, what are you going to do if you quite like this idea of going designer? You don't really want to risk working with the melted wax. It's just, you know, either you don't burn candles at home, or you don't want to buy any wax pellets, or it just looks as if it's sort of, you know, too much like a sort of hardcore crafting activity. Well, we could add, do something different with our wax bulbs, but again, taking the designer element and ridding it of its roots. So obviously your hyacinth would last longer if they had roots on them. This is just a designer play on what we've got. So what I'm going to do here is to show you another technique that you could use. I will move my hot wax out of the way, and then I'll come back and show you an alternative for creating more of a designer look. So I'm just going to move that out of the way. Make myself a little bit of space. So how about using some moss? So do you have any moss left over from your coral reef making or the projects we made in our last set of Zoom classes? How about taking some moss? And this here is flax moss. I haven't bought it specially, it is left over from what I had last year. And what I could do, actually what I might do, I might save that from dipping. I might use the ones that have got the root on with the ones I've dug up from the garden, and make a little pocket for them and just wrap it round. And this is a bit like making a poor man's kukudama, which is the Japanese hanging garden. Normally you would have packed it with a little bit of clay, a little bit of sphagnum moss to keep the moss, the roots moist, and then done this sort of clay and compost sort of ball around it, and then finished off with the decorative moss. So of course that's not going to stay. So I have got my wire, my mossing wire that I used at Christmas, or you could use string, and I'm going to wrap that round, and I'll leave myself a little bit of a length here, just so I can tie it off. And a bit like as if you were sort of winding wool into a ball, just sort of tumbling the wire around so it encases it, and that just gives it a bit more of a fresh looking designer look. You know, we have these lovely baskets, the bulbs themselves are beautiful, but sometimes, you know, a basket of bulbs just looks a bit too old hat, and why not stretch your creativity by doing something a little bit different. So here with the cut ends of the wire, I am just going to bury them without scraping them into the bulb and just putting them back, so I'm not going to scratch myself. And that would be another way of doing a designer look to your bulbs. So that would be that way of doing it. And then what if you don't have bulbs? What if you prefer to have your bulbs, you know, in the wild, looking natural? Is there another way that we can get some interest into the arrangement that we're going to be making, or the grouping of materials we're going to do? And another thing you could do is, I've got here is a polystyrene ball, or you could use a flower foam ball, and I have pinned leaves on it. So those of you who are members of flower clubs may well be familiar with this technique, but if you are not, I will show you how to do that. So I have got polystyrene ball, and I'm choosing a leaf that is quite robust. So we have bay leaves in our garden, and cutting off from the stem, and it's just like making a little mosaic. And these leaves will dry eventually and just change the appearance, the colour of your little ball. It's lovely working with bay because it's scented, and so a really, really glorious scent coming up. So it's quite nice to be able to work with something new. It's living. And here I have a box of pearl-headed pins, or you could use dressmaking pins if they've got the sort of bulbous head on them. I'm going to try and pick out the ones that are all vaguely the same colour. And the easy thing to do, you need to pin your leaves in place. So it's like creating a little, it is sort of a little patchwork. And I'm going to pin them in place, and you could spend, you know, a happy 20 minutes doing this. What I will say you have to do is, as the leaves dry, they will shrink. So you do need to make sure that you have overlapped them sufficiently well. And the problem areas will be at the top, because you're where all the little leaves meet, and I normally slip under a leaf at the top just to cover that up, so that I know that there's going to be no little white mark at the top. And I would do the same at the bottom as well. And trying to, I try and put my pins in for decorative effect. So this first band of leaves at the top are going to have, you know, a small circle created by the pearl-headed pins. That's entirely up to you what way you prefer to work. So I put those around there. I won't make this whole ball, I'll finish it off when we're working afterwards, but you can see what you do there. And it's a bit like brickwork. I would then come in and put another leaf to cover over this gap here, and eventually you'd end up with a ball like that. Another thing to think about as well is, perhaps if you've got some excess moss and you quite like that ball shape, well, how about taking a handful of moss, it's brown on the inside, but you're rolling it in under itself. So you've got a lovely mossy little hummock. And again, taking your wire, your door wreath making wire, run that over and over until you feel it's holding together. Roll yourself off a bit at the end, cut off and put together. So you've got lots of sort of ball-shaped things. And then the next question is, what are you actually going to do with them? Well, you could just individually place them. You know, you could have your hyacinths lined up. Just make sure, even though they are sealed, just be wary of any polished surfaces. That would be lovely on a place setting, you know, fancy dinner. You know, perhaps you're making a fuss of things, you can't go out and see people. Perhaps you're having a fancy dinner with your family at home, and you could set your table and have, you know, fabric napkins and that kind of thing, and you could present everybody with a hyacinth. But what I thought I would do, and I just have to see whether you can see this or whether I need to come back to me. But I have inherited this bowl here, sort of wirework bowl. So I thought I would use this to add in my bits and pieces, and no flower arranging skill required. It's as if you're arranging a bowl of fruit. If you like, you know, getting out your shiny green apples and displaying them artfully, it's quite creating a little bit of a still life. And to add to that, I've made a little bird's nest out of twigs. So I could put that in there, perhaps even resting the little ball of leaves in there. I could have my little moss ball nestled down inside. And of course, the closer it gets to Easter, I could start to add in little fake or real Easter eggs, chocolate eggs or fake ones, and start to position them together. Now here, with my hyacinth, it's not growing straight. which doesn't look very attractive. I'd much rather it was squat and straight up, but why don't we use that and the curve of it? So I might have this one diving out of the bowl in this direction, and then have all the others sort of tumbling around, because they don't need to be in water, so you can position them however you want them to go. So that I'm going to work on that a little bit later, but you do want to sort of put your materials somewhere, otherwise there's no point in making them. And as we are getting closer to Easter, you know, perhaps your little, I think there's nothing says Easter and spring like to me, then I love a gingham ribbon. So I might even fancy up my little hyacinth, something like caught on my fingers there, by tying a little bow around the neck of my hyacinth. And you could imagine that looking really beautiful on your breakfast table, spring morning, Mother's Day coming up, you know, making a fuss of yourself. A little ribbon there, and then I will just cut off the ends at a slant just to stop the ribbon fraying. And that one's already done. And you've got another way of presenting your hyacinths. So what I'm going to do now is I'll bring the camera back up to me so you can see the little grouping that I've made on the in my fruit bowl, and we can have a look. So I'm going to switch over. I made an awful mess here. And just as I put, you know, the final finishing touches, I would need to add in much more here because it's all falling through, but it gives you an idea of what you can do. And it's about adding something eye-catching, the textural interest. So I've got the leathery leaves against the fuzzy moss balls. I've got this sort of kukudama thing here. People will be wondering how your hyacinths are still living, even though they've got no roots. And you can layer them on top. You know, a few little fake or Easter eggs and things like that. So it's just about putting things together without having to go out and use flower foam, and just enjoying working on something creatively. And I've even got some little candles here, which are just a bit too big for the candle holder. So I'm going to use some of my moss to wrap around the ends of that, just to add a little bit of a buffer and carry on that festive theme of this little sort of bird's nest effect. I'm not sure you can see that there if I move that way. It's just a nice bit of frill. You can fix your candles in place using blue tack, but you just have to make sure you set it down quite low, because you don't want to be, you want to notice the candle and not the fixing. But I do rather like the moss effect here. It's really sort of shouts out springtime and bird's nests, and it sort of replicates a little bit of the bird's nest that I made using my silver birch twigs that I've been wrapping around and around. So there you go. So I think the key here to this arrangement, well, it's not really an arrangement, is about dipping your hyacinths in wax. And the key to this is being brave. And much as it sounds, you know, awful when we love flowers, but detaching the bulb from the roots and then being more creative and designer about it. And yes, probably the question you're all dying to ask is, well, how long are your hyacinths going to live? There's no guarantee. They're not going to live as long as they would when they're in soil with their roots, but I think they're going to give you loads and loads of pleasure. So whatever is shortened in life will be heightened in pleasure, because you've done something different. It'll be eye-catching, and it'll be a talking point with your family at home. So I've left myself a couple of more to decorate. I may well have to put my wax back on the heat again just to get it melted off again, but I would say it's an absolutely lovely technique to use if, of course, you've saved up your candle wax and you don't mind potentially ruining one of your pans. So at this point, I am going to say goodbye to our recorded viewers, and I will turn off the recording. I will take the spotlight off me, and then we'll have the opportunity to say hello and to welcome everybody who's new to the group. And this is your chance for live Q&A. And if you have brought any of the materials with you, that we can sit and make and create and chat together. So I very much take a back seat unless you specifically want me to respond to any questions.